best way to learn about classes is to actually see one be developed and used in a program. So that's what we're going to do in the next couple of lessons. We're going to create a simple class, a name class, that stores a person's first, middle, and last name, and then we'll provide some utility methods for working with a name. To create a class, you're going to have a separate definition in your program, and it has to go in a particular area of the program, and it has to go outside of the class program. Remember that Visual Studio automatically creates a class program. Our class has to go outside of that. It can either be at the top or the bottom. I'll put it at the top just so it's easier to see it. So a class definition always begins with the keyword class, followed by the name of the class. After that, we have an opening curly brace that indicates the beginning of the body of the class. The first thing we're going to do is declare the data members, or the variables for the class. In object-oriented terminology, we don't use variable. We call them data members or fields. There's several names you can use. And I'll probably either say field or data member. I'll try to use data member most of the time. A name consists of three parts: a first, a middle, and a last. So we're going to create those three members for our class, and that will be all we're going to keep track of in this simple class. Now you'll notice I put the keyword private in front of the data type. I'm going to explain more about why we use private later, but understand that the private keyword is what's called an access modifier. And what we're saying here is we're saying that first, middle, and last are private to the class definition, and only the class definition has access to the value stored in first, middle, and last. We'll say a lot more about private access as we go through this chapter. That's all we need for data. So the next thing we have to do before we can even use the class is we have to create what's called a constructor. The constructor allows us to create an object with our class. That process is called instantiation, and I'll be explaining that a lot more later on. So the constructor is always defined using the same name as the class. So I write public name, and that becomes the name of the constructor as well. Its arguments are going to be the three pieces that we need for a name, a first, middle, and last. So I'm going to use fname, mname, and lname for those three arguments. In the definition itself, what we're going to do is we're going to assign each argument to the piece of data that belongs to it. So fname is assigned to first. Oops, I made a mistake right here. Mname is assigned to middle, and lname is assigned to last. Let's close out all the other bodies. Also, that will keep those errors from triggering up as you saw them earlier. So here's our definition. Class name, our data members are first, middle, and last, and they are private and they're of type string. Then we have our constructor. Notice it's public because the user of the program, someone who wants to use the class, has to be able to access the constructor. And we're going to see how that works in just a moment. It's an example of what's called a method. In older terminology, that might be a function. But for object-oriented programs, or in an object-oriented programming language, we call that a method. The constructor method will take as many arguments as you need to initialize the data members. So we're going to have fname, mname, lname, three strings to initialize first, middle, and last. And that's what we do in the body right here. So then we close off the body with this closing curly brace, and then we close off the class definition. Now we're ready to use the class, so we're going to drop down to the class program and static void main. To declare an object of name type, we use name first, like it's a data type, and then we'll just use my name as the object name. Then an equal sign, followed by the keyword new. The keyword new indicates that we're about to call the constructor for this class, and then we can call the constructor with the three arguments. Notice that IntelliSense tells me what the arguments are for the class. One of the nice things about using Visual Studio. IntelliSense gives you as much help as it can to make it easy to work with the program. And that's all we have to do. Now, if we ran this program, we would have a name object instantiated called myName, and its data members would be Michael for first, Mason for middle, and McMillan for last. I'm not going to run this program because it doesn't really do anything. We're going to use this program again in the rest of the lessons, so we'll see how it runs later. But at least now we know how to create an object once we've defined the class, at least as far as its data members and a constructor goes. I have a lot more to say about constructors also, but we're going to save that for another lesson. That'll wrap up this lesson on data members and constructors. Now we're going to move to the next thing we need to know how to do with the class, and that's create a toString method so that we can display the data that we've assigned to the class object.